Pub. My name is Rebecca Riley, and I'm the Teen and Adult Engagement Assistant Manager at OMSI. And for tonight, I'm also your host. Woohoo! Before we get started with our amazing lecture all about lemurs and primates in general, I got to talk to you about a couple of things that are going on at OMSI these days. We are closed to the public right now, the museum. We hope to reopen in the next few weeks. Please check our website, omsi.edu, for updates. Once we know, we'll let you know. We're on kind of a waiting game right now, but we are super excited to bring more science to you. And while we're closed, we are still committed to sparking your curiosity and igniting your imagination. And to help y'all out with that at home, we've crafted and curated a bunch of awesome, engaging science activities and experiments to inspire you to experience the wonder of science from wherever you are. So please visit omsi.edu for more information and resources. And if you do any of the science at home activities, please send us photos or videos so we can see what a wonderful scientist you are. I hope you enjoyed tonight's pre-pub trivia and music by local Portland artist Rowan and the Billy Goat. We hope to have them play a live concert in OMSI's planetarium sometime in 2021. Putting on these live shows takes a lot of work, and we have an amazing partner that helps us make this happen. So a big thanks and shout out to Celestream for providing the streaming services for tonight's Science Pub. We really appreciate them and all the things they do. They're amazing. For the holidays, consider buying a membership to OMSI. OMSI memberships are on sale for 15% off until January 1st. This is a great way to support your beloved local embattled science institution. So please visit omsi.edu/membership for more information. Another way to engage with OMSI, if you are over 21, a way to hang out with OMSI when you're at home is our 5th virtual OMSI After Dark Fizz Fest. We have curated a box of 10 fizzy drinks for y'all, including hard seltzers, hard kombuchas, and a ginger mule. So if you join us, you can enjoy some science demos, interviews with all of the makers, entertainment, music, magic, my face, and more for this virtual event on Friday, January 29th. Early bird tickets are $45 and are available right now on our website. This is a call to Science Pub. Help us put the pub back in Science Pub by ordering some delicious food and beverage from one of our wonderful partners around the state. All these folks are awesome and we should support them. Here is what tonight will look like. We are going to warm up with a primate themed trivia game. So get ready to participate in that and have some fun, learn some new fun facts. After that, we'll have an hour-long lecture by Dr. Vasey. And then after the lecture, we will have about 30 minutes of Q&A. And for the Q&A, you can submit your questions at any point during the lecture. You don't have to wait till the end. So anytime you think of a question as you're listening, just type it into those comments on the live feed and we'll collect all of your questions and I will ask them of the speaker after the lecture. And if you enjoyed tonight's lecture, please consider making a donation or purchasing a Science Pub glass. You can do that by the donate button on our Facebook page or omsi.edu/donate. And also the Science Pub glasses, you can see a picture of those on your screen. They are super duper cute. But don't worry, there's no pressure to donate because we are super dedicated here to inspiring your curiosity and bringing science and fun science stuff to all of y'all all the time. So please sit back, relax, and get ready for a great lecture right after our trivia. Woo! I would like to introduce to the Zoom, Abby Putnam, early childhood educator extraordinaire, is going to play trivia with us. Hey, Abby, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Love your earrings. Love your face. Glad to see you here. Are you excited about anything in particular with tonight's lecture? Is there anything you want to learn more about?
I want to see really cute pictures of lemurs and primates. So
yeah.
And hear all about them.
I feel like I want you to tell us where your background knowledge on lemurs comes from.
My background knowledge comes from a dedicated fascination with watching Zaboomafoo and Kratz Creatures on PBS growing up. So
yeah, hopefully there's some more Zaboomafoo fans out there, everyone at home. To play along with us at home, feel free to just shout the answer out loud, or you can type it into the comments too if you want to participate that way, or write it down secretly on a note and don't show anybody and then just insist you got them all right. That works too. For trivia, there'll be 9 questions, and I will read the question, give you time to answer, and then I'll tell you the answer to each question before we move on to the next one. Sound all right?
Yes.
Okay, I believe in you, Abby. You're gonna do great.
Thanks.
Question number 1. Excuse me, pick up. Which of the following mammalian orders is not a part of Yarkontoglires? Yarkontoglires, which is a group of mammal orders. So that word was, it's the name of a grouping of mammal orders. So is it primates, which includes lemurs, monkeys, apes, and humans? Scadentia, which is tree shrews, Megachiroptera, which is bats, or Lagomorpha, rabbits, hares, and pikas. Which one feels like it does not belong to you?
I think, based on looking at that diagram really, really quickly, that it's probably not the Megachiroptera, the bat.
I thought the diagram was too small for you to get any really. Ooh, you are right. Yeah. So the bats are not a part of this group of mammal orders.
Very cool.
We're going to learn about all those other things on there tonight, but not bats. Okay. Second question. This picture is less informative, but I mean, it's informative to my heart, but maybe not. Which of the following traits do all members of the order Primates possess? Is it ever-growing incisor teeth, dermatoglyphs, which means fingerprints, a patagium, which is a fold of skin behind each limb, or color vision?
Wow. I don't know if I have, is that like your elbow fold?
No, it's like back in here.
Your armpit fold? I feel like it could be fingerprints. It's not ever growing incisors because that's the other. Fingerprints, or maybe color vision.
Which one are you gonna go with?
Let's go with color vision. Yeah, it's probably fingerprints.
Oh yeah, it is. You're so right. Good job. It was fingerprints, dermatoglyphs. That's cool. Okay, next question. Also, I tried to make this map less informative, so try not to look at that. Madagascar is a large island in the Indian Ocean, South Atlantic Ocean, or South Pacific Ocean?
In the Indian Ocean, I believe. I love the maps.
Yes, it is. And this is an actual map that is accurate for size representation. Look how small Canada is, as it should be.
Oh, how cute.
Okay, you're doing great. 3 out of 3. We're going on to number 4. Which of the following correspondences between a living primate group and its geographic distribution is correct? Apes and Old World monkeys occur in Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. New World monkeys occur in South and Central America. Tarsiers are found in an island in Southeast Asia. Lorises, which are bush babies and galagos, occur in South Asia and Southeast Asia, or all of these.
Wouldn't it be nice if it was all of these?
I feel like that would be nice because that was a lot of information. Oh, right. Excellent. Great logic.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. There's a lot of really cute creatures that were just spoken of in this question. I hope we get to see pictures. Ooh, true or false? Okay, I believe in you with this one. Lemurs occur naturally only on the island of Madagascar.
I believe this is true.
Yeah. Look at that lemur.
Island species.
On the island. That might actually be at a zoo. I can't tell.
Might be at Zabumafu's house.
It might be, yeah. Which of the following primates have a highly dynamic fission fusion social organization? So fission is breaking apart. and doing your own thing. Fusion is coming back together. Dynamic means it changes a lot. So a social organization that changes a lot and involves doing your own thing and then coming back together. Is it variegated lemurs, chimpanzees, spider monkeys, humans, or all of the above?
That's kind of interesting. Well, I don't think it's chimpanzees because they seem to be pretty tight, according to Jane. Humans seem to do that, but I don't know if that's just like social newer stuff. Maybe the lemurs. Variegated lemur?
So you're saying just lemurs and not humans?
Well, is it all of them?
Yeah, it is. We primates are pretty complicated socially. I feel complicated socially. So this is a sign I'm a part of this group. Okay. When a group of variegated lemurs, Variesia, which is that picture there, enters a tree canopy with ripening fruit, what do they do when they get there? Do they select some of the fruit to eat before leaving the tree? Do they eat most of the fruit before leaving the tree? Do they feed simultaneously with frugivorous birds and other lemur species? Or do they feed quietly to avoid attracting predators?
What are their predators? Hawk? Eagles?
Oh, no.
I feel like they're not. I don't know what's going on in Madagascar. Maybe they eat a lot of fruit. Maybe they eat with their friends, the birds. Maybe they're. I mean, it would be a good idea to eat quietly.
Yeah, these all seem pretty reasonable. I don't know if I can give too much help with this one.
Yeah. All of the above.
What's your final guesstimate?
Let's say they are gluttons and they eat most of the fruit before they leave the tree.
Oh man, they only take some of the fruit. They share, but just not at the same time.
They're very nice.
Maybe we'll hear more about that.
Yeah.
Okay, you're almost there. True or false? Many day-active primates bear litters. A litter is multiple young at one time, and build arboreal nests, which is trees, in which to care for them. So do many primates that are awake in the daytime bear multiple young and build them nests in the trees? True or false?
Gorillas build trees, I think. So I'm going to go with true.
Do they bear litters, though?
No.
Look at this sweet picture. Look at that monkey and a monkey baby.
Maybe it's
false. Okay. Ooh, we're going to end on a Zen photo of a sunbathing lemur. Which of the following widespread lemur traits is linked to Madagascar's island climate? Is it highly seasonal breeding? Is it terrestriality, so they are adapted for movement on the ground? Is it Cathemorality, which is they're kind of awake and asleep randomly throughout the 24-hour cycle? It's not associated with day and night. Nocturnality, where they're active at night and they sleep in the day.
Okay, so Madagascar is like on the equator or pretty close to it because it's off the coast.
It's near the Tropic of the low
that far down.
Capricorn. I think it's below that even.
I know that they can jump around, so I'm going to go with B, the terrestriality.
So you think they don't live in trees? They live only on the ground?
No, it says adapted for movement on the ground. That they can live in the trees too, but they can jump around. Or maybe they are active all the time. Or not. I don't know. They're day living.
I will say, I think Madagascar is a pretty, it's a bit a ways from the equator.
Oh, okay. So.
Further south. It's off of Mozambique.
Oh, okay.
Capricorn is like
Does that mean that they're nocturnal?
I think Tropic of Capricorn is like at the top of Mozambique.
Oh.
So they're not like the same all year round season-wise because of the equator. Okay, we're gonna finish this up because this is our last one. So what's your final guess?
I like that funny word, Cathemorality. Let's go.
Ooh, that is a great word, but they have highly seasonal breeding. We'll learn more about that.
Cool.
Abby, I definitely was keeping score, and I totally remember that score was, and it was, oh, there is 10.
Oh, hi.
9. Okay, hold on, there's 10s. Habitat degradation combined with the effects of climate change are projected to eliminate rainforest habitat in Madagascar by what year? Ooh, this is a sad question. 2030, 2080, 2800, or 3000?
Well, it's probably sooner than later. Let's be optimistic and go with B, but it might be more like A. Yeah.
It is 2080. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to say you got a 9 out of 10. I kind of forgot what you did get, but I feel like that's an A. That's a solid.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, have a good night.
Okay, folks, that was trivia. I hope that you all won all of the winning with all of your feelings, feeling positive about learning. We're going to learn some more with our speaker, Natalie VC, PhD. Natalie began her career as an undergraduate intern curating human remains from archaeological contexts at the University of California at Berkeley, where she earned a dual degree in anthropology and film studies. She then completed the doctorate at Washington University in St. Louis and a postdoctoral fellowship at the Pennsylvania State University. At the Howard University College of Medicine, she taught in the anatomy department before taking up her current position as professor of anthropology at Portland State University. Primatological research has taken her back and forth to Madagascar many times and to collections housed in natural history museums in the USA, Europe, and Madagascar. Her research focuses on behavioral ecology, life history adaptations, and the evolution of primates with an emphasis on the endangered and recently extinct lemurs of Madagascar. In the 1990s, she established a research site on, I already forgot how to pronounce this, Maswala. Nope, we're going to learn how to pronounce that word in the lecture. A peninsula in northeastern Madagascar, and is currently amid a 10-year demographic study of red variegated lemurs. With collaborators at the San Diego Zoo's Institute for Conservation Research, genomic study of the genus Varesia is currently underway. So that is enough talking from me. Hey, Natalie. I think you're still muted.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. So we're ready for you to share your slides whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right, there we go.
Okay, looks great. Take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's my pleasure to join you. And thanks, Melody, for the invite, and Rebecca for hosting. I'm going to talk about the lemurs of Madagascar tonight. I'll talk about other things too, to give context for understanding their ecology, evolution, and behavior. And hopefully after my lecture, you'll all be able to answer all 10 trivia questions. I decided to try to build around those 10 questions as I put this talk together today. Okay, so first, let's put the living lemurs in context with the primates. Among the living primates, there are 6 natural groups. The lemurs, shown over here with the blue tertiary branches, the lorises, shown in green, tarsiers, the monkeys found in South and Central America, and then monkeys found throughout Eurasia, and then the apes, the group to which we belong. So you can see each group, each of those 6 groups forms a branch, and then each branch is split into smaller or secondary branches, each of which is a family. And what I want to point out here is that for the lemurs, you'll see that there are 5 secondary branches. There are 5 families of lemurs, and that compares to 2 families among the lorises, just 1 in the tarsiers, a one-off group of primates, and then just a single family of monkeys from the Old World, from Eurasia, and just 2 families of apes. So this is one way of viewing the primates, the living primates of the world. But each of those 6 groups has a history, what we call in phylogenetic history in evolutionary science. So you can see that all those 6 groups are laid out here again: the lemurs, the lorises, the tarsiers, the New World monkeys, the Old World monkeys, and the apes and humans. These are all living forms, extant forms, but they had a history. And there are branching points in geological time. At some point deep in the past, primates shared a common history. There was an ancestral stock. And so there was, in fact, a branching point for each of these 6 living lineages. Some lineages didn't survive until the present and don't have any descendant species, so to speak. And what we try to do is to reconstruct the branching points. We do that by comparing anatomy, comparing molecules, genetics. We do reconstruct the phylogeny, the evolutionary relations, also by studying phylogeography, which incorporates reconstructing the position of the land masses through geological time and how they might have brought together or separated ancestral groups of plants and animals. And of course, we also integrate fossils where they are available to try to reconstruct the tree of the phylogenetic history of any group, such as the primates. There are vast gaps in the fossil record. You see here a few groups, a few known groups penciled in, and what you're seeing here on the top bar is time, geological epochs from the earliest shown here, the late Cretaceous, the end of the age of dinosaurs, followed by a bunch of epochs in the Cenozoic era, the Paleocene, the Eocene, the Oligocene, and so forth. And then you can see the time scale inserted, the beginning of each of those periods, or epochs, I should say. So given that there are vast gaps in the fossil record, we actually can gain the most information, the most complete data for reconstructing ancestor-descendant relationships by studying living species, where the entire organism is available to us, all the soft tissues and the hard tissues of the body, as well as our DNA. And in addition, we have the opportunity to study ecology and behavior, which is almost frightfully difficult to do in the fossil record, although those of us who do it find the challenge quite stimulating. So from all of those sources, comparative anatomy, comparing molecules, phylogeographic history, and fossils, we know that primates emerged as a mammalian order during the Cretaceous period, sometime probably during the late Cretaceous period. You can see here's the ancestral node, the ancestral primate. So some 70 to 90 million years ago during the late Cretaceous, primates arose. And lemurs and lorises, you will see, shared a common history until they branched sometime during the Paleocene or Eocene. So the living lemurs and lorises, they shared a common ancestor to the exclusion of the other groups for a while, and then they diverged into separate groups, separate lineages. And this all happened a long, long time ago during the Paleocene or Eocene. Right, so Madagascar has been separated from the African mainland as an island in the Indian Ocean for over 100 million years. Long before lemurs arose, some 60 million years ago. We don't know exactly when or how they arrived. The fossil record is quiet on these issues. And even if the fossil record were great, there is still a lot of inference involved in reconstructing the adaptations, the way of life of the ancestral common stock of primates way back there in the Cretaceous and the Paleocene and the Eocene. And this is a really big question. What were the earliest primates like? And I'll get back to this question when I talk a bit more about mouse lemurs coming up. But to first contend with this question about the arrival of lemurs to Madagascar. We know that it happened. It probably occurred when large masses of floating vegetation, floating islands were blown in down rivers off the East African coast after large storms. Most castaways on these floating islands of vegetation, such as some small-bodied nocturnal primates, for example, most of these castaways likely perished at sea of starvation or desiccation. But at some point, a population arrived to an island that was inhabited by few other mammal groups whatsoever. Today, for example, on Madagascar, we find tenrecs, one family of rodents, a couple of carnivore families, hippos, bats and birds, and lemurs. Okay, so, and this is actually rather typical for primates. For islands that we'll see a very small number of groups that manage to arrive, but those that get there, on the island of Madagascar, for example, lemurs evolved in isolation from other primates and underwent a unparalleled adaptive radiation. This radiation produced upwards of 100 living lemur species with differing anatomical and behavioral adaptations that have allowed them to enter diverse ecological and diverse ecological niches. You'll see a map of Madagascar shortly with the plant formations. Besides the lemurs, very few other groups arrived, as I mentioned, and these circumstances, along with the great expanse of time, at least 60 million years, explains their tremendous adaptive diversity. So what I'm going to do now is introduce you to each of the 5 families of lemurs, say a bit about their ecology, behavior, some of their adaptations. And I'll do it by family, and I'll just sort of do a potpourri of lemur traits. So this group that you see depicted here are from one family, all of them nocturnal, and they're all quite small-bodied. Some of these mouse lemurs weigh as little as 300, 500 grams, and none of these lemurs weigh more than 1 kilo. Mouse lemurs feed on insects and feed on fruit. They feed on honeydew, nectar. This lemur, Chirogalius, have a look at this great big tail. They hibernate. This is a very unusual trait for a tropical mammal, but nonetheless, they do so. They hibernate for 6 to 9 months a year, and they store fat in their tail, the fat-tailed dwarf lemur. This one, Fauna furcifer, the fork-marked lemur, has special adaptations for gouging tree bark and getting saps to flow. It's a specialized sap feeder, or what we call exudates. So even among each of these families, we see a lot of different forms of adaptation. And I want to pause here to say a little bit more about the mouse lemur, because recall that I talked about one big question that we have in the study of primatology is to try to reconstruct what the earliest members of the order were like. And the living mouse lemurs, as well as galagos, probably provide us with a good picture. It's not that they're not frozen ancestors. They've evolved all along through time, and they have are not simply frozen in time. But the reconstructed ancestral primate was probably nocturnal, was probably small-bodied, and as you can see, had the adaptations in order to occupy this fine branch niche, in order to get at those resources that we mentioned earlier, insects and fruits that are located on the tips, on the ends of canopy trees. Okay, there's different ways to get into this habitat, but not too many animals have managed to do it. The ones that have each done it in their own different way, and we'll get back to that point a little bit later. Let's now look at another family of lemur, Lepidlemuridae. These are called sportive lemurs, common name. They're also all nocturnal. There's only a single genus, Lepidlemur, and they are very unusual, weighing less than 1 kilo. They are highly folivorous, meaning they make their living eating leaves, which is a very tough adaptation for such a small-bodied primate. In fact, outside of Madagascar, there are no other primates that depend heavily on leaves or foliage for their diet. They have low metabolic rates, as do many lemurs, and special adaptations in their gut, an enlargement of the cecum, which allows them to digest these fairly resistant foods, resistant in terms of nutrient absorption. Okay, so Lepidlemurs doing their thing through time on Madagascar. Let's now look at Dalvintonia. This is the only living member of this entire family, the most unlikely primate that ever lived. It has ever-growing incisors like a rodent. No other primate does. And it's got very long and strong fingers that it uses to crack open and access foods that are really hard to get at, hard seeds. They bore into the bark of trees to extract larvae. In so many ways, they you would hardly think of them as a primate unless you actually looked carefully to see that they have some of the hallmark features of primates. But on the face of it, it looks like a bat or a fox or something very, very odd. But it's a lemur. Entirely nocturnal lemur. In fact, all 3 groups that we looked at so far are exclusively nocturnal. But the next family, and with some representative species shown here, has both diurnal, meaning day living, and nocturnal species. So the nocturnal member of this family is called the woolly lemur. And what you're going to see in this group, whether you're looking at the 1 kilogram, 800-gram woolly lemur, or its large-bodied relative, the shifaka, is that they're both clinging to vertical supports. So one thing I haven't mentioned so far is the locomotor diversity of this group. This family in particular have tremendous adaptation for vertical clinging and leaping. They cling to vertical supports, project themselves off, and then land onto another. They also, the larger bodied forms, are able to do a lot of suspension hanging from the hind limbs or the hind limb and one forelimb. And again, you'll see that they're accessing that fine branch niche when they do so for feeding. Like the leppy lemur I just talked about, the woolly lemur is unusual in that at a very small body size, it has found a way to also focus its diet on leaves. Very tough. We tend to see when we look at the rest of the primates in other parts of the world that folivory is characterized or co-occurs with large body size. Got really bulky foods that you can ingest. They take a long time to digest in your intestine and your stomach. And if you have a larger body, you have a longer gastrointestinal tract and a larger time to process those foods. But a leppy lemur are doing it without the advantage of large body size. They need to process those cecum, which assists in that regard. The larger bodied relatives of the woolly lemur, however, eat fruits and leaves and seeds as well, and are exclusively day active or diurnal. Here's the fifth group, the family Lemuridae, and this is the most speciose, meaning there are a lot of species in this particular family, and so I'm only showing you two of them. The variegated lemur here, which you'll hear more about in the talk, a species which I spent a good part of my career studying in-depthly, and brown lemurs as well. White-fronted brown lemurs. This is the female in this case, so she has a more conservative coloration. But what we see in this group, there are a fair amount of frugivores. In fact, both of these could be considered having a focus on fruit in the diet, which overall is exceptional among the lemurs because we see a lot of dietary adaptations and not a lot of lemurs that spend a lot of time eating fruit. But one thing that I will add is that all lemurs eat at least some fruit. Okay, it's one of those items that primate adaptations were probably designed to get from that fine branch niche, along originally with insects. So we see, in addition to the varied diets, the varied body sizes, these lemurs weigh anywhere from 3 to 5 kilos, the lemurids. We also see a great deal of variety in their social organizations. Among the small-bodied nocturnal ones, they're often solitary or dispersed. Brown lemurs, typical of other day-active lemurs, form cohesive groups. They spend all their time together. They eat, sleep, rest, and forage together. They move around the forest together. Rough lemurs do a very interesting combination of what we see in day-active primates that are gregarious, that stick together, but they're also dispersed. They have what's called a fission-fusion social system. It's a highly dynamic form of fission-fusion social system, in fact, and in fact, I'll say a bit more about that now since it got brought up in the trivia. It is a form of social organization that is not common in primates, but we see it across the whole order in a sort of one-off fashion. There is a large ape that has a fission-fusion social system, the chimpanzee. There is a fairly large-bodied primate monkey from South America, spider monkeys, that have a fission-fusion social system. And then we get to Madagascar and we have a lemur who also has a fission-fusion social system. And one other group that has this type of social organization are humans. So when I try to describe the social system, often the easiest thing is to create an analogy with what the average human does throughout their day. They wake up in their home, they're close to their children or their family or their partner. Back in the old days, you would have gotten up and got ready to go to work, and then you separate from that core, from your pod. And then I might meet up with, say, a colleague at work. And then I'll be in my office by myself for a while. And then I'll go to a classroom with 100 students in it. And then I'm with 100 people. Then I'll go back to my office for a while. Then I'll go to another class that might have 10. So what's happening is that the size and composition of my social unit is constantly in flux. It's reforming. The number of individuals in my social group as a human changes throughout the day. The composition, in the morning, it might be just my 4-year-old child. And then it might be a cohort, somebody I teach with. And then it might be my students, which at Portland State can be of any age. So these changes that go on are called fizzing and fusing. And it's actually very uncommon in the primates. We only see it in a few groups. Most primates stick with each other, I should say day active primates, with the same group of individuals consistently. They range, they eat, they sleep, and so forth. So we see all manner of social organizations among the lemurs, including fission fusion. All right, so here's a sort of summary of the adaptive diversity of lemurs. Huge adaptive radiation, body size ranging from 30 to 6,700 grams, about 7 kilos. Diets among the 100 or so lemurs are any combination of insects, gums, fruits, nectars, leaves, bamboo, underground plant storage organs, and a small amount of vertebrates for some species. With the posture and locomotion, I described the vertical leaping and clinging, arboreal, quadrupedalism, suspension. And in terms of their activity pattern, we see both diurnal and nocturnal forms, as well as a very unusual activity pattern called a cathemeral, which we see in no other living primates. I'm going to circle back to that, just finish up here to indicate that in terms of social organization, among those nocturnal forms, they're solitary, they're still social, they communicate by scent and vocalizations, but they spend most of their time alone. We see dispersed social organizations, and then we see these highly cohesive forms in the day active forms, as well as fission fusion. We even see pair bonds, sometimes called monogamy, and then as I said earlier, 5 distinct families. So let me circle back to this term, which probably many of you have never heard of before. So let me circle back to this term, which probably many of you have never heard of before. What does cathemeral mean? Well, cathemeral means that you can be active at any time during the 24-hour light-dark cycle of the Earth. You conduct your activities, feeding, resting, travel, both in the daytime and night. And this is a very difficult, you would think, position to straddle, because most animals are either are adapted to be active during the daytime, to make their living in the daytime, or the night, and it involves a commitment. Cathemeral lemurs, and they're known only from this family, from the Lemuridae. Not all 5 families show cathemorality, but many members of the family Lemuridae have this type of activity pattern. So what gives? What is it about Madagascar that is placed these lemurs into a position of trying to make a living both in the daytime and during the night? Okay, so let's now take a step back, if you will, for a moment to consider this characterization once more. Have a look at lemurs. Here's a schematic view of the Earth. And on this one island, which is, dare I say it, the size of California and Oregon combined, has 5 families of primate. Whereas when we look at all of Eurasia, we see only 1 family of monkeys, only 2 of apes, and 2 of lorises. So I want to take a step back now and think about the close relatives of primates. Now that you've got the schematic for who belongs in the order Primates, primates have close relatives among the 20 or so orders of the living mammals. And this group depicted here, a tree shrew, the tree shrews, were once included among the order Primates. In fact, for the better part of the last century, tree shrews were considered primates. But after exhaustive comparisons, anatomical, molecular, developmental, and so forth, it became clear that they are not primates, but are best placed into their own order, Scandentia. And we refer to this as a sister group, a close relative of the primates. And meanwhile, a little-known mammalian order, the colugos, have drifted into the limelight, showing a close relationship with primates as well. Not only in terms of anatomy, but molecular evidence has accumulated elucidating, showing us which other groups of mammals to which we're most closely related. So here you've got another one of those phylogenetic trees, but this one is very sticky. It's just the stems. It's not a sort of dramatic tree of life for primates. And what it is showing you, and these are based on molecular data in this case, is that the primates are grouped here with tree shrews, Scandentia, and with the Dermoptera, the colugos. And that those 3 groups make up a superordinal grouping called Archonta, and then the sister group to Archonta are the lagomorphs, rabbits, hares, and pikas, and rodents. And together we make up the Euarchontoglires. So that's how we are nested among the mammals. So these molecular studies combined with phylogeography have provided resolution to sorting out the vexing issues of mammalian phylogeny, and not without some very interesting surprises, such as the recognition that the supercontinents Laurasia and Gondwana actually gave rise to separate groups of mammals deep in the history of mammals during the Mesozoic. All right, so there they are, the Lagomorpha and the Rodentia, some bunnies here and a squirrel shown here, grouping with ours. There's a lot of things that are hard to feel good about these days amid COVID and all the other challenges we're facing, but sometimes I like to just slow down and think about how we're related to these charming creatures and feel good. All right, so let's now turn our attention back to primates. How is it that we decide who's more closely related to who? How do we reconstruct these evolutionary relationships? Well, we do it by creating a consensus of traits that distinguish each of these groups. Let me go back here for a minute. That distinguish each of these groups from other groups. And for primates, primates share a suite of traits that distinguish them from other groups of mammals, and every other group of mammals also shares a suite of traits that distinguish them from other groups of mammals. And I'm certainly not going to talk about all the traits that distinguish primates from other mammals, but I want to talk about just a couple. And I want to focus on the hands of and feet of primates to do so. So one trait that distinguishes primates from other groups of mammals are their grasping hands and feet. Now, a number of traits combine to form our grasping hands and feet. They include an opposable big toe, skin ridges, and their associated tactile organs and nails. So let's begin here by looking at all these sets of primate feet, except for this one. This is the tupaia, the tree shrew. And on the left side, you see a foot, and on the right side, you see a hand for the genus Lemur, Dalvintonia, a bush baby, and so forth. And then down here, some of the apes, gibbons, orangutans, gorilla, chimpanzees, and humans. So you can see that humans are actually unusual in that we have lost the ability to grasp with our big toe. We've made a compromise for upright walking, and our foot has become a very inflexible but stable support for striding, bipedal walking and running. But that's not true. We're the exception. All other primates, if you look at the foot, you're going to see a divergent, grasping big toe. And we have nails on our fingers and toes, at least on the big toe. We also have nails instead of claws. Here's another image. This is just showing the hands and feet of prosimians. If you had any question as to why lemurs or galagos or lorises might be primates, well, they share with all other primates, monkeys, and apes this divergent big toe, okay? All of them do, even though the conformation is different. And then lastly, if you look closely at this image, you're going to see that there are pads, okay? Now, we have relics of these on our hands. In fact, I want everybody to pause, everybody in the audience, and have a good look at your hands. And if you've got some lotion nearby, take some lotion and rub it in, because it's going to allow you to see some of the features that I want you to look at. And I'm going to take a little break and do this myself. My hands are very dry, and so it's hard to see all these features. And take a moment just to pamper yourself a little bit, feel good about yourself, feel good about being a primate, feel good about being a human, and have a look at the palm of your hand. So you're going to see what we refer to as dermatoglyphs. The ridges, skin ridges. And if you look at the tips of your fingers, you're going to see that they form whorls. In fact, they're individual down to the lemur or human or ape, okay? They are distinctive in each individual. And they function to increase the grasping capabilities of primates in an arboreal setting, okay? Within, just below the skin surface, in combination with these skin ridges, we have highly tactile end organs called Meissner's corpuscles. Now, we're not the only mammals to have these, but it's not a common trait. And they exist in association with our, this is a section through a bit of skin, and each of these bumps you see is a skin ridge. And those tactile end organs called Meissner's corpuscles allow for great sensitivity in addition to providing a gripping surface. And not only that, if you look hard, you're going to see that there's a direction, a horizontal direction to the skin ridges along your hands, which indicates the direction which the gripping needs to take place for an arboreal primate that is not using claws to grapple on arboreal sports, but is directly using their hands and their feet. So it's a fascinating set of adaptations in the hands and feet of primates. Think back to that fine branch setting. And here, I know it's not a nice picture because you see an animal in a cage, but this is such an awesome picture showing you the direction of the skin ridges in the pads on the palmar and sole of the feet. So think back to that fine branch setting that I mentioned, in which the ancestral common stock of primates back in the Cretaceous managed to enter in order to forage for fruit and insects. It's this complex of traits in the hands and feet, one of the most important traits that allowed primates to enter this niche. Other groups do it. Bats access this setting by flying with wings made of skin, which are called a patagium. Birds fly there. And arboreal rodents grapple their way through the trees using their claws. But primates, on the other hand, climb, leap, swing, walk, and run in the arboreal setting in trees. And as I mentioned earlier, all primates at the very least have a nail on one digit, the big toe. And this is an unusual group that has re-evolved sort of claw-like nails because of the feeding niche that they occupy. But they still retain all the other features of the grasping hands and feet of primates. So primates on the whole have retained a relatively primitive skeleton involving very little evolutionary change through the fusion of bones or through the loss of skeletal elements. And as a result, and combined with a very well-developed nervous system, primates are highly agile and flexible in the trees. Okay, this is their party card, so to speak, for making a life in the trees. Right, so let me move us back now to the island of Madagascar. Now that you've got a good context for lemurs as mammals, for primates as mammals, and some of the key features that allowed us to enter the arboreal niche, and now you have a good sense of the diversity of the lemurs themselves. And now I have some bad news, and that's that those 5 families of lemurs that I discussed are only what's left after recent extinctions of much larger bodied lemurs that were overlapping with human populations that settled Madagascar just during the Holocene, meaning just during the past thousands of years. Okay, so we don't even call these extinct lemurs fossils because they haven't entirely mineralized yet. When you look at them, you're still looking at real bone and real teeth. Okay, and all of these lemurs, this is just a collection of skulls on a recently burned landscape, were larger than any of the lemurs that are still living today. Okay, they were larger in body size. Every single one of them, all the large-bodied species, have become extinct in near time. Whether it was 2,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, hardly matters, although this is a great debate. And this here is a reconstruction of Megalodopus, this very long-snouted subfossil lemur shown here. So even without the demise of lemurs, undoubtedly due in part to the settlement of the island by humans, sometime between 2,000 and 10,000 years ago, living on an island was challenging, even before humans arrived. And this is borne out by many of the traits that lemurs have that appear co-adapted to extreme climate, such as the intense cyclones that strike the Indian Ocean region. Some other traits are the strict seasonal breeding that we see among most lemur species. Now, lots of mammals have some degree of seasonality. It's often linked to the supply of food, such that when young are born, they are born into either a season of abundance or they're weaned during a season of abundance. So we see seasonality among the mammals, but very strict seasonality, such as what we see in lemurs, again, is somewhat exceptional. Many lemurs restrict their breeding to their mating to just a few days a year. Yes, the females come into estrus, they're interested, they're interested in mating. Copulation begins, and in a couple of days, the shop is just closed up again. So they have a very small window for becoming pregnant and before they cease to cycle again. And one of the most extreme cases of this are the ruffed lemurs. If a female lemur doesn't conceive during that brief window of time, a female ruffed lemur will probably not cycle again until another year goes by. Okay, with some of the other lemurs, it's a little bit less tight. Maybe she'll cycle 3 times and then that's it. If she doesn't become pregnant, they just forego breeding until the next year. So very high seasonal breeding. I've already talked about the Cathemorality, this ability to take in both nighttime and daytime and to do it well. Okay, are they doing this because, for example, the food resources on Madagascar are not what they are on the continents? Are the fruits, are the leaves, they have a higher fiber content, lower protein content? These are the kinds of questions that are being actively investigated as to why Cathemorality is so well entrenched among this one family of lemurs, the Lemuridae. But one thing that seems apparent is that strict seasonal breeding, for one, likely evolved in sync with these episodic natural disturbances. The frequency and the intensity of tropical storms that strike the island within the Indian monsoon system is quite intense, quite exorbitant. And likely there is some co-adaptation between dealing with disturbance, natural disturbance, and lemur biology. Okay. All right, so it looks like we have a little bit more time. I think I want to do for our last few minutes is to give you a case study of the variegated lemur, of how it goes about breeding, how it goes about getting through the breeding season and raising its young. This is one of the questions that I personally have investigated, and some of the data that I'll briefly show you took about 20 years to be able to collect, to establish the site, and to keep the project going such that we could finally capture the behavior of these very unusual nest building day active primates. Okay, so I haven't talked yet about nest building. We see it among the primates, but we only see it among small bodied nocturnal prosimians, nocturnal primates that are also tend to have solitary social organizations. And very few primates, even among this group of nocturnal lemurs, give birth to litters. Okay, so variegated lemurs are exceptional in that they bear litters in arboreal nests, yet are large-bodied, day-active, and group-living, gregarious. Furthermore, Varisha nests are built exclusively to care for young, whereas the litter-bearing nocturnal prosimians who use nests also use them for sleeping in throughout the year. So very, very enigmatic primate. So in addition to building these nests, you have to look at the whole suite of characters that interfaces. Most primate young cling to their mother from birth. Not so in Varisha, in variegated lemurs. Their young do not cling from birth. Instead, they're carried by mouth until their locomotor system is well developed such that they can get around on their own. And then the infants are left. They're stashed in the treetops at these early developmental ages while the females and other group members go off and forage and feed and socialize. And then they return to these nested young to suckle them on schedule. If you ever had a child, the average primate, baby feeds whenever it wants because they're clinging to the mother's body. But if that's not the case, then the young have to be fed on schedule. And when they're left alone, the young are subject to added risks such as thermal stress, not having a large warm body next to them, predation by birds or the few mammalian predators that got to Madagascar, and also falls, accidental falls. So we've got to assume that finding protected arboreal sites must be at a very high premium for the longevity, the livelihood, and the survival of these young. Sites that are supportive, sheltered, and concealed. And here's an image which I captured from the canopy of some of these youngsters practicing locomotor behavior while their caregivers are gone. One thing I noted in my early studies, my PhD studies, is that I found that the mother wasn't the only caregiver. That in fact, all members of her pod, her core group, were providing care to young. Males, juveniles, other mothers, and other females who didn't have young. And so this set me on a whole career trajectory of really trying to figure out how it is that these primates managed this cooperative breeding system. Cooperative breeding systems where everyone cares for the young, who are not their own genetic offspring, are very rare in vertebrates in general, in the animal kingdom. But every now and then we see it. So here's the site where the study took place. And I'm just going to cut to the chase. I've got, as it turns out, after mapping all of these trees that they use for nesting and stashing their young and comparing them with trees at large and food trees, the trees used for reproduction, which are the gray bars, are broader and higher than any other trees in the forest. They're using the very largest trees to nest and stash their young. It's just and then here we see the girth of the trees, and these are both food trees at different points in the past. And then finally, the trees used for reproduction here. And you can see that the girth of these trees is quite high. A number of 18% of them are over 100 centimeters in diameter at breast height. That's like measuring the trunk of the tree. 15% are between 80 and 100, big trees compared with those used for feeding. And it had already been established even before this study that the trees used for feeding by rough lemurs were very large to begin with. And then this is how they map out. And this was quite astonishing when I first looked at these data, even though I had similar data from earlier work. What you're seeing here, all these dots, are the nest and stash trees that each female employed to nest her young over the first 3 months of life, at which point the young start moving independently. And each female used about 40 of these mammoth trees to nest and stash their young. And furthermore, in this case, you see that they're non-overlapping. And these are females that know each other. They're in the same community, and yet they have largely non-overlapping sets of trees, with the caveat that I only studied one female per group per core group because only one female gave birth. But I know from prior work that sometimes more than one female will give birth in a given region. And in that case, they share. They can share the care, even the nursing, the suckling, the caring, and the general attention given to young. So the bottom line is that these lemurs are extremely dependent on intact forest canopies where the large trees have not been removed in order to survive, not only to feed, but more poignantly, to reproduce. I've described this as the extended phenotype of the lemurs because the canopy, the forest canopy and the large trees are an extension of the biology of the parent and essential to the survival of the offspring. All right, so I think I'm going to start wrapping it up with just a few images, all of which were shot from the forest canopy, one of my other endeavors to try to bring the behavior and ecology of these lemurs to a more public audience. These are the loudest lemurs in the forest. Rough lemurs are extremely loud. They have loud calls. This is a lemur calling. It's not threatening, it's just doing what they do. They have these roaring, shrieking choruses. Here's one of the infants captured just as it's entering a phase of some locomotor independence. And you can see that there's a lot of individual markings, even on the feet of the youngest animals. This is how we tell them apart in our long-term ongoing demographic study, by these individual markings. And not for the faint of heart. This is the environment in which I am when I'm photographing with the kind assistance of some very talented tree climbers. So with that, I think that's my last slide. I'd like to simply share with you that although the plight of lemurs and so much other wildlife is disheartening, we know that lemurs have actually been contending with intense climate for probably ever since they arrived on Madagascar, and they have shown us to be somewhat resilient once they're in a protected zone, once they're not hunted, once their forests or forest patches are not being logged or cleared. So as a matter of earth stewardship, I've made it my life's work to work on the behalf or to advocate for their survival, to know them, to love them, to learn about them, and to share with others about them. Thank you very much for your attention this evening, and I'm happy to open up the floor to questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vasey. That was amazing. We love all your photos, and I love seeing that shot of you in the canopy to give some context for what it takes to get those photos. That's crazy.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, we've got a few questions for you, and I think more will keep rolling in. For folks who are watching, this is your time to stick through your questions. Any questions you have for Dr. Vasey in the chat there. One of our questions is, what are the predators of lemurs?
Yes, that's a good question. It used to be thought that lemurs didn't have very many predators because, as I described, not very many groups of mammals reached Madagascar. But on the other hand, we know that lemurs all lemurs have alarm calls that appear to be directed toward threats. And the more we learn, the more we know that even the small number of predators on Madagascar, potential predators, are real threats to lemurs. So there are several groups of carnivores. Cryptoproctopherox, commonly known as the foos. It's about the size of a bulldog, but with shorter legs. It can climb trees, quite ferocious. When you look at this thing, it looks like it comes straight out of the Miocene, straight out of the geological past. There was a fossil form of Cryptoprocta that was larger, a subfossil form, recently extinct form. There are also a few smaller carnivores, all in the weasel family, viverids, mongooses, which could easily prey and do prey on small lemur species and young, like the size of, this is a youngster, probably weighs a couple 100 kilos. Even though the adult weighs 5 kilos, the young are vulnerable. And then there are birds of prey as well. Hawks, accipiters, not only living, but also there, within the past 20 years, we've discovered some fossils, some subfossil raptors, which were significantly larger than any of the living raptors. So carnivores and predatory birds, birds of prey. Of course, humans.
Yeah. In thinking about maybe considering those predators, and you mentioned they can eat the young, what's the benefit for those two species you spoke of that leave their young in nests instead of bringing them around everywhere?
Yes, well, this is one thing that really prompted me to try to understand, you know, we had no idea we knew that they made nests, that they didn't carry their young around from early reports in the wild, but we had no idea where these nests were, what the trees were like. And so for rough lemurs, at least, variegated lemurs, they are selecting, I'm going to go back to an image for this, Rebecca, to answer to that. They're not only selecting the largest trees in the forest that have difficulty of access. They're, you know, these nest sites and stash sites are out in the crown periphery. There's limited routes of entry to get there, arboreal routes of entry. And when they leave the young at first are totally immobile. They don't move. Once they start moving around, then the risk is higher. But they're highly sheltered both from above and below. I've climbed trees in which there was a nest and couldn't even see it. I knew where it was because another feature of these nest sites, at least in this forest in northeastern Madagascar, is that they are trees in which there are nests or stash sites are covered with old growth woody lianas. I was trying to get an image into this presentation and I couldn't get it to translate, but the sites are enclosed, they're sheltered, they're supportive, they're actually very hard to see. And they're in the biggest trees of the forest. You know, the way the question was phrased is, what is the advantage? Well, rough lemurs give birth to litters. And I should have backed up and told you that most primates, the vast majority of primates give birth to a single offspring, and that offspring clings from birth. But if your young don't have that capacity, then this is another suite of adaptations that we see in just one relatively large living lemur. The small-bodied nocturnal prosimians similarly give birth often to litters. And their nest sites are different. They're often in tree holes and they're not in the largest trees in the forest. I mean, they're 500-gram animals. So I hope that went part of the way towards answering that question.
Yeah, I think it did. So another question is, do lemur social groups have a lot of fission and fusion daily like humans, or is it more seasonal?
All right, so there is only one lemur species who has a highly dynamic fission-fusion social system, and that's this one. And there's a black and white variegated lemur, so one genus. So it's not all lemurs. And then ask me your question again.
So I guess the lemur, for this lemur type specifically, is the fission and fusion happen daily like humans, or is it more seasonal?
Actually, that's a really good question, because in rough lemurs, it is both seasonal and daily. There are two components. They do it all day long. They actually have a very complex social organization. I could have spent the whole 45 minutes on that, but I really wanted to talk more broadly about primates. So the rough lemurs fizz and fuse throughout the day, throughout the year. But there is also a seasonal component to their fission fusion social system, which we don't see in the fission fusion social systems of apes and New World monkeys. And it works like this. During the cold, food scarce seasons of the year, it's the austral winter, so to speak, the rough lemur communities disperse. So a community of rough lemurs might consist of 30 animals that know each other, that affiliate with one another. You never see all 30 in the same place at the same time, though. Okay, and that's a good number for my site in particular. 30 to 45 animals form the community. But they tend to, the animals within that community, they form smaller groups, which we call core groups. And those groups, the individuals in those groups, tend to spend more time with each other than they do with members of other core groups. And they have a geographic positioning too. They tend to spend more time with the individuals in a particular part of the communal home range, okay? And during the austral winter, they only spend time with members of their geographically clustered core group. And they fizz and fuse in that core group, but they don't fizz and fuse with the entire community. And then once summer comes, and spring comes, the young are born, resources are abundant, a lot of fruit, young leaves, flowers, and they're eating all these foods. Then you start to see the fission fusion happening within the entire community. So yes, there is a seasonal component, and it's something that, again, I think ties in with the seasonal climate of Madagascar. A lot of tropical climates are not especially seasonal, but Madagascar is.
That's really interesting. Okay, next question. Are there antagonistic relationships between the many lemur species, or are they mainly separated by niche?
Yeah, another good question. Since we're talking about 100, maybe 80 to 100 species of lemur, it's hard to give this a yes or no answer. But what I can say is that some species are a lot more tolerant of co-occurrence, coexisting, what we call sympatry, than are others. And it can even vary by season too. So there are times when you'll see multiple species feeding in the same tree. And those species, for example, ring-tailed lemurs, they're kind of, the easygoing, put me with anyone lemur. On the other hand, there are some species that are a lot less tolerant of co-feeding. And I'll give you a case study from from the variegated lemurs. When food is scarce and the females are pregnant, they chase frugivorous birds, other lemurs. They chase everybody out of their feeding tree. Okay, it's worth it to protect their food resources during a time of year when resources are limited. On the other hand, in the austral summer, they're in a great big feeding tree where there's a lot of space in that tree for, say, a brown lemur species. They'll let that brown lemur species come in. It's not worth the effort to chase them out if there's a lot of fruit around. So, short answer, it varies, but they are not always. They do not always peacefully feed together.
Great. Speaking of feeding, are lemurs ever used as food for humans?
Yes, they are. I gave a presentation for Real Science a couple of years ago, and I talked more about that. I kind of stayed away from some of the more unpalatable topics this evening. And in fact, I have an article that will be appearing in a book on just this topic. Lemurs are eaten. They're hunted and they're eaten throughout Madagascar. One of the big questions in lemur biology is whether or not humans played a role in the extinction of all those large-bodied subfossils that I mentioned in my talk. Let's see. There we go. And there are arguments to the effect that it was just climate change. There are others that feel that it was that think there's some evidence for hunting. It's always been a tricky thing because most of the small amount of evidence showing the butchery of lemurs in the fossil record doesn't occur in archaeological contexts. It occurs in sites that don't have the remains of a human existence, doesn't have all these human artifacts. And yet we do find evidence for butchery in the fossil record as well. I've just reviewed, there's a whole sort of fledgling field revolving around the study of primates as bushmeat. And this field trained anthropologists and have gone to Madagascar, a handful, and really produced excellent quantitative evidence on lemurs as part of the economy and as part of the human diet today. And if I were to sum it up in one word, somewhat crudely, it would be that lemurs are eaten in a broad but shallow fashion, meaning that lots of people eat lemurs, but they don't eat very much of lemurs because there are lots of other foods available to human populations. Madagascar was settled by Iron Age people that fished, hunted, gathered, and brought cattle and domesticated plants with them. So they brought their food sources with them, and they probably coexisted. My colleague, Lori Godfrey, who's thought about this for at least twice as long, if not more, than I have, really perceives as humans and lemurs having coexisted for a long time, maybe up to close to 10,000 years. But then we see a crash. We see a crash in these large-bodied lemurs about 1,000 years ago. And it happened very suddenly. So that's the explanation that needs to be made. And I think what happened is that human population just grew so large that that the small amounts of lemur that they ate began to have a large impact. So again, a broad, shallow pattern. Lots of people eat lemurs, but it makes up only a small proportion of the diet. Most of the diet are domesticated crops and domesticated animals.
Here's a little prediction question for you, so it'll be a little fuzzy. How many species of lemurs do you see remaining 50 or 100 years from now?
50, sorry, my son is jumping up and down. Was it 50 to 100 years ago? Or 50
Yeah.
to 100 years into the future?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, as a matter of fact, I was going to include an image from one of my colleagues' recent publications, 2019 publication, where this kind of modeling was done using the ruffed lemur as a proxy, because rough lemurs, variegated lemurs, are probably the most sensitive to habitat destruction. They tend to be the first lemur species that exits the community, that goes locally extinct when habitats become degraded and when selective logging breaches a certain point. So in a paper that recently appeared in Nature Climate Change, Toni Morelli and colleagues, she's a climate scientist, she put together projections about how long, and since Varisha are exclusively rainforest animals, use them as a proxy, okay? So the rainforest is expected to, under two different models, one just looking at the removal of rainforest habitat or its destruction. Another set of models looks at what climate change will be like over the next 60 to 80 years. And then the third set of models combines both factors, climate change and habitat destruction. And those models indicate that most of the rainforests of Madagascar will be gone by 2080. No matter which way you look at it, whether you just model climate change or just model, the rates are different, and whether you hold the forest constant in terms of the amount of degradation, all kinds of modeling, but 2080 is, without any intervention, if climate change proceeds in the fashion that it is, if deforestation proceeds at the rates, we will see the complete loss of the rainforests in Madagascar by the end of this century. Sorry, yeah.
And what would you say, like, would it be feasible at all to introduce lemurs to other habitats, or would that just be a bad idea biology-wise?
It's not a bad idea, and it's been done. So there's cause to be there's cause. To do work like this, you have to maintain some degree of optimism, or at least you have to decide that this is the best way to spend your time. So there are a number of reserves where lemurs have been introduced, and you're probably also maybe thinking about these rewilding efforts. There are colonies of free-ranging lemurs, meaning they're living in forests. They aren't Malagasy forests. They aren't even tropical forests. But at Duke, give a shout out to the Duke Lemur Center in North Carolina. They have had a colony of lemurs captive breeding since the early 1970s.
Wow.
And at the Lemur Conservation Foundation, one of the organizations that I partner with, they established a lemur colony more recently in the 1990s. And they are part of the North American Zoo and Aquarium Network. So they don't just breed the animals willy-nilly, they breed them within the framework of the official captive breeding network. And it provides them a lease on life. In fact, the whole, practice of zoo science really changed with the advent of conservation. We have to view, especially for endangered species, zoos and other environments such as the reserves I mentioned as a holding, as an ark for species that are highly endangered in the wild. It gives us yet another reason, not just as menageries, as places for people to go and enjoy and be educated about wild animals from around the earth, but also to make those captive populations a reservoir for the species.
That's really great to hear about some of those other populations. Here's a question that maybe you understand better than I do. How large are the lemur groups, and do they separate at a certain size?
How large are the lemur groups? Yes, I think I know what that question is getting at. What's the group size? I mentioned that most primates, not just lemurs, but most primates, day active primates, are group living. They spend all their time with each other with the same individuals. It's sort of foreign when you think about humans because we don't do this. We're constantly changing. But most primates, that's what they do. That's their game plan for social life. All right, and you don't change groups a lot typically. Fishing, you might emigrate when you reach sexual maturity, or you might get pushed out of a group because there's for any variety of reasons. So on the whole, what I can say about lemurs is that lemurs on the whole tend to have smaller group sizes, 3 to 10 individuals, whether you're talking about fox or lemurids. Here we're not talking about the nocturnal species, which tend to be solitary or have these dispersed networks. But even there, 3 to 10 is pretty typical for lemurs. Rough lemurs are exceptional in that their communities become much larger, but typically they're only with about 2 to 3 other individuals at any one time. So I guess that would be a rough approximation about when you might expect a community to split. But there are other ways of groups maintaining their size, and that's through emigration and immigration during subadulthood. So often one sex or the other will leave their natal group, the group into which they were born, and as juveniles, but typically as subadults, and find another group to enter or form a new group. Find another lonely individual out there looking to make a living in the trees.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll make a last call for anybody else who has any questions to ask. Anybody else have some stuff? Okay, folks, I think that is all of our time for tonight. Let me pull my little notes back over here. I would like to thank Dr. Vasey so much for all of your wonderful knowledge and input tonight and expertise. I hope everybody at home enjoyed tonight's event. If you would like to watch this video again or share it with your friends, please check out the video section on OMSI's Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates on future events and inspiring content from OMSI. And I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but please consider supporting Science Pub and making a donation via the Facebook donate button, or visit omsi.edu/donate, or get one of those sweet Science Pub pint glasses. We are taking a little break at the end of the year from Science Pub, but we will be back in 4 weeks on January 19th with a lecture by Tumko Davaku, the Chief Operating Officer at Portland Audubon. He'll talk about his work with Spirit Mongolia, a community conservation movement created by the nomadic herders in Mongolia, and he will tell us about their current challenges, including the survival of the people, the sustainability of their natural ecosystems, and more. So I hope to see y'all there. And once again, I want to say thanks to our partner Celestream for making tonight's event possible. And as always, you can get more information about all the things OMSI on our website at omsi.edu. Thanks, everyone.